It's like we think we all know the story. And, in so many ways, we do, but her words, I don't know, they change it. They change it for me somehow. It's like they make her more human somehow. Yeah, more human.
The press always want to know, being Marilyn Monroe, what is it like? Well, what I want to tell them is,
I look at my life and I think I've missed the boat. Everyone else is on the boat, but I'm not there. Everyone else is on the boat, but I'm not there. But I'm not there. But I'm not there.
It's nearly impossible.
But I'm not there.
1956, and Marilyn Monroe has been taking sleeping pills, Valium, uppers, and alcohol daily for 3 years now. And she's in an extremely peculiar place, which none of us listening will ever know. She's one of, if not the biggest, female star in Hollywood. She's ridden the wave to get here. You won't find anyone who doesn't know her name, doesn't associate her image with the American dream, and hasn't seen her films. And what I mean when I say peculiar place is that she'd reached the level of fame that she wanted. She'd gotten to where she wanted. In fact, she'd gotten beyond where she wanted. And she really had to work out what's next. And that's what's driving her, this what's next. And it's actually coming back to the thing I talked about earlier. It's this desire to be seen as intelligent and credible. What's going to help here is the arrival of a man into her life who she'd actually met years before and nothing had happened with, but she'd always kind of had a bit of a fancy for, and that man is Arthur Miller. If you're not familiar with Arthur Miller, I'm sure you all are. He's considered to be the greatest American playwright to ever exist. He wrote things like Death of a Salesman, The Crucible, All My Sons. It's really interesting, actually, Arthur Miller, because, of course, his plays are all about the American dream. They're all about people trying to make it, people trying to survive. Death of a Salesman is said to be the play that represents the American dream better than anything that's ever been written. And here he was, tangled up with the very thing, the very person that he was writing about. There's a credibility about Arthur Miller, and when it's reported that he's leaving his wife for her, taking his children, it's big news. The right kind of news? No, not really. Straight away people think it's a sham. For neither of them that was the case. They actually were in love, but people can't help but go, oh, it's just another man to attach herself to. He gives an absolutely brilliant interview much, much later in his life when he's very, very elderly by this stage, and he talks about people thinking that the marriage was a sham, and he'll say it wasn't. We truly loved each other, we just couldn't make it work. He'll also say, and I love this, he says, this assumption that she was unintelligent, that always pissed me off, because it was not true. She was brilliant. He talks really beautifully, as you would expect for a playwright. He talks really about this kind of sensual side of her, this bigger-than-life person that she was, but how she actually had this darkness at the real centre of her. And he'll say, I also had a centre of darkness, and in many ways that's where we combined. My plays are all about darkness and complex people, and we both were those things. She was especially complex. There's a story which I'm sure you might know, but he writes a diary entry one day where he's sort of writing on paper some thoughts about Marilyn, and he writes that he can't really understand how she can be both this evolved woman, this sex symbol, and a small child all at the same time. He writes that her tantrums are unbelievable, and that sometimes he just doesn't know who she is. He can't understand the person standing in front of him. Now he makes a massive mistake. He leaves his diary open, and she reads it. And the argument is huge. Huge. It's the beginning of the end for their marriage. That diary entry would really haunt them for years to come. I mean, Arthur, if you are going to write things negatively about your wife, hide the book, you idiot. He will say she just couldn't take the truth about herself. She didn't want to hear the truth about herself. Outside of her marriage, career-wise, things are looking a little bit grim. She's been suspended once more by Fox Studios for failing to turn up to work. And they're set to fire her until she pulls another one of her spectacular moves. She gets herself a fancy Nancy, expensive lawyer, and he finds a loophole in her contract. So she'd been promised this massive bonus for work from a couple of years earlier, and that bonus had never arrived. So it means that they hadn't actually fulfilled their side of the bargain, and it means that her contract can't be terminated. So they have to keep her on. And what she does here, it's quite brilliant. She actually leaves Los Angeles. She goes to New York, and she establishes the MMP in New York, Marilyn Monroe Productions. Let me just make this clear. Nobody did this at the time. You had your big studios, right? They were the king. Nobody went up against them. But she did. She was like, fuck it. I'll make my own films. I'll do the roles I want to do. So she sets it up with a friend called Milton Green. Now, Milton Green's the man responsible for, I would say, almost most of the really iconic images we see of Marilyn Monroe. They were good friends, and he photographed her often. You know the really famous one where she's sitting down and it's almost like balletic. She's got on this sort of ballet, like it's like a long tutu she's wearing. She's barefoot. She's looking at the camera. Those are the Milton Green photographs. I mean, it's on 1 million prints all over the world with words like live, laugh, love written next to it. Anyway, right, so the plan is she's going to run her own company. Now, nobody really likes this idea. Who is this woman? And why is she trying to destabilise Hollywood? How dare she? Who does she think she is? So, Fox Studios say, look, screw you. If this is the move you're going to pull, set up your own production company, fine. We're just going to put out films with other actresses and they'll be really popular. They try to sort of tempt her back with a film called How to Be Very, Very Popular. It's a sort of showgirl gets caught up in a murder comedy. And they say to her, if you won't do it, fine, we'll replace you. We don't need you. Turns out they do. The film was an absolute flop. And they realise they're going to have to get her back. And the only way to do it is money. So they offer her this. A 7-year contract. Complete control of the films. They'd offered this before and it had all fallen through, but this time they said, we're serious. We'll give you the choice of everything. However long you need to make a film, we will make that work for you. It's a pretty sweet deal. So she comes back to Hollywood. Where are the public at this time on the Marilyn Monroe story? Well, they still adore her. And they still buy newspapers if she's in them. The press, well, they're way less kind about her. They report every late appearance at the studio. They try their hardest to get really unflattering photographs of her, drunk or sleepy. They also let the world know for the first time that she's receiving therapy and seeing psychiatrists. She had been secretly checked into a psychiatric facility under an alias, and she'd spent a month with doctors trying to determine the root of her depression and her dependency on pills, but it never really worked. And when the press were tipped off by a worker at the hospital, the press went crazy with the story. Marilyn on the edge. Miss Monroe, the doctor will see you now. They were just the sort of headlines that were kicking about.
If I am a star, the people made me a star. No one else, no studio, no big boss. It was the people, my fans.
The bosses at Fox, well, they've signed this new contract, but they make it clear they're not happy about it. A studio boss says in a statement, she's impossible, she does what she wants, and she's utterly unreliable, but we have millions, and I mean millions, tied up in her. So we have to work with her. He goes on to say, I have over 200 letters in my office from actors, makeup artists, directors, extras, caterers, who write to me and say, please don't hire her again. She's a nightmare to work with. But I have to give her these contracts because the public want her. What is it the public want? Why can't they get enough? A director who, at the prospect of working with her again, is ready to jump off a cliff, says this. She's truly wonderful to watch, I'll give you that. You know, it amazes me that she can turn up on the set, not know any of her lines, not know where to stand, not know how to look at the camera, and yet she still comes out of the picture looking like the star. I don't know how she does it. He's asked to elaborate on what he means, and he says, well, she's had 5 years of acting training and she's still talentless. The woman can't act. It's disgusting to watch her waste money on coaching. You could have trained 10 actresses for that, and yet here we are. We put her in these movies, and I'll say it one more time just in case you missed it. She can't act. Man, he really didn't like her. Ooh, harsh. But I think it's very, very telling of the opinion of her at the time. But of course, Marilyn, she's got something up her sleeve. She starts her next film project. And arguably, she's going to make the most famous film of her life. She's going to make Some Like It Hot. A belter of a film. It's absolutely brilliant. But it was troubled. And it was maybe more troubled than anything she'd done before. She was late. She was drunk on set. She couldn't learn her lines. She couldn't stay awake. Tony Curtis, I know he's said a lot about it, but I'll just pull on one thing that he talked about. He says it was a nightmare on set with her. When she would eventually show up to film, you'd have to do take after take after take because she was never ready. She couldn't get the line. Even if it was one line in a scene, she just couldn't get that one line right. She didn't like the way the director was looking at her. She didn't like the way the cast were looking at her. She was nervous. She would go back into her dressing room and would have to pry her out of the dressing room. And the directors at the time, they would take the other actors away and say this to them. Look, I don't care if you have to do the same take 100 times for her, just to get that one line right. No one's paying to see you in these films, not any of you, it's her. So you make sure that for every take, you nail it. And out of that 100, if we can get one, just one, where she eventually remembers the line and says it correctly, then that's the take. That must have been exhausting to work with. I think what made it worse is that the film overran by months. It cost 3 times the original budget to make the film. It put the entire production team on a knife edge every day. And yet, when it's released, Marilyn Monroe walks away as the biggest star of that year. She walks away with the crown. She comes out on top. She wins awards for her comedy performance. And cements the fact that she is the most bankable actress in the world. And the venom from those who worked on that film with her is just awful.
I'm not an actress who appears at a studio just for the purpose of discipline. This doesn't have anything at all to do with art. But one of my problems happens to show. I'm late. I guess people think that why I'm late is some kind of arrogance, and I think it is the opposite of arrogance. I also feel that I'm not in this big American rush, you know? You gotta go, and you gotta go fast, but for no good reason. The main thing is, I want to be prepared when I get there, to give a good performance or whatever to the best of my ability.
Okay, so married to Arthur Miller. By now, she's had an affair with Marlon Brando. A lot gets made of that in the papers. And there's about to be another man in her life. And, well, I think we all know who that is, don't we? Enter presidential candidate Mr. John F. Kennedy. Now, when he comes into the story, of course it gets written about and reported in a million ways. The press at the time get the idea that there's an affair going on. What doesn't help is photographs of her slipping out of his hotel room at 3 a.m. in the morning. They don't help, but both completely deny it. He's married to Jackie, happily, and the rumours are denied. That reminds me of the bit in Legally Blonde that I so love. Best film ever made. Heard it here. The bit where he's breaking up with her at the beginning and he says to her, "You're more of a Marilyn and I need a Jackie." Now, if you ever hear from anyone who was close to them at the time, they'll say they didn't really have an affair. I mean, they had a brief fling, but it was over quickly. They just wanted sex from each other. According to friends, and how much you can believe is a big part of the problem with her story, she had no designs on being the new Jackie. It's not what she wanted. She was never interested in being the president's wife. So the two of them, they get photographed at parties together. You can see the pictures online. I just always think they look awkward together. Anyway, her marriage to Arthur Miller is on a slippery slope. She had, by this point, gotten him involved in the films that she was making because she wanted him to rewrite her dialogue. She didn't like a lot of the scenes, and this was much to the annoyance of everyone working on the film because scriptwriters were basically pushed to the side because Arthur Miller was on set rewriting her words for her to speak. Aside from the battle with her own mental health and her dependency on pills, they would spend months apart while they both worked on different projects. Sometimes they worked together, other times they wouldn't see each other for months, and tragically she suffers a miscarriage during their marriage. This is the second miscarriage that she's had in her life, and it's after the second miscarriage that she makes the second attempt on her own life. It's the same as before. It's the pills, it's alcohol, and this time it's Arthur Miller who finds her in their home and he takes her to the hospital where she recovers. Now the press love it. Of course they do. This would sell newspapers like nobody's business. Marilyn in second attempt at own life. The one good thing that comes out of the marriage was that Arthur Miller had stepchildren who absolutely loved her. She stepped into that role of mother with them, and I mean, how exciting. Imagine being 10 years old and your stepmother is Marilyn Monroe.
All my stepchildren carried the burden of my fame. Sometimes they would read terrible things about me, and I'd worry about whether it would hurt them. I would tell them, "Don't hide these things from me. I'd rather you ask me these things straight out, and I'll answer all your questions."
She is beginning to lose faith at this point in her psychiatrist, who she feels is no longer helping her. And it's during one of these sessions she talks to the psychiatrist about being worried about having slept with JFK. Was that a mistake? This kept her up, this kept her awake at night. The psychiatrist decides to quickly refer her to someone else. He felt like he couldn't get into another complicated relationship with her and keep her stable. He was out of ideas. She was unmanageable. So she gets referred to a man called Dr. Greenson, and he was known at the time as a high-profile celebrity therapist. And he'd already heard of the JFK rumours. Everyone had. Now this is what's interesting here. Dr. Greenson, who will play a massive role later on, tells her in her therapy sessions to stay away from people like Frank Sinatra. Stay away from him. She's had a brief fling with Sinatra at this point, but it's not good for her health, he tells her. And when she asks about JFK, what should she do there, he doesn't tell her to stop that one. Interesting. Why not? And now, something is about to happen that is completely out of her control. Something she doesn't actually know is happening. Not even sure she ever knew that this happened. The FBI are about to open a file on her. And this means that they are paying close attention to the every move of Miss Monroe. Actually, they've been paying close attention for a couple of years now. And that's for two reasons. Firstly, it's the JFK rumours. He's tipped to be the next president, and she apparently can't keep her mouth shut to doctors about the affair. So that's a real reason to be keeping tabs on her. And secondly, the other thing they're very focused on is communism and her possible communist beliefs. Arthur Miller was being watched as a communist at the time. He was said to be a threat to the House of America. And because he had had these dinner parties attended by many people, Marilyn was there, and the FBI were very interested in this. Another reason is this close friendship with Frank Sinatra, who was known for his mafia connections, which didn't sit well with the FBI. So it puts her in this really bizarre position. She's a suspected communist, she's got links to the biggest mafia boss in town, and she's possibly having an affair with the future president. I mean, it's not a position everyone finds himself in every day. I think we can agree. I mean, I've been in some tangles in my life, but nothing quite like that. But the concern is that now she's half drunk most of the time. She's out her face on pills, and who knows what she's going to say. Who knows who she's talking to, what information might get to the wrong people. Albeit she might be confiding in friends, but there's too much at stake to just let her be running around town saying what she wanted to who she wanted. So a plan sort of begins to form in the minds of a few people. One of them is actually Frank Sinatra and his close company of men. They're worried that she knows too much about the mafia. She knows way too much. She knows too much about JFK. So, here's the idea. Let's throw a party and we'll invite her. Back in Hollywood, before this party invitation comes, she's completely unaware of the surveillance that's going on at the time. She's completely unaware that she's being watched. And she begins to work on the last film that she'd ever finish, The Misfits. Now, she wanted to do this film, and she really wanted to do it because she felt like it showed her off as an actress. She got Arthur Miller to write her dialogue. There's been a bit of a swing in the sort of downwards direction of her acting career. She'd made a film the year before called Let's Make Love, and it bombed in the cinema. It got really nasty reviews. The studio, they blamed her poor work ethic. They said that she didn't care about her performance. That was the reason it was bad. It's quite sad, but at the time they were actually casting for Breakfast at Tiffany's, and of course they wanted the hottest actress in Hollywood to play the role, but studios just wouldn't touch her. They felt like she was a risk. They knew with Breakfast at Tiffany's they had a good film, and they didn't want, and I'm quoting, the darling Monroe ruining yet another film project. So she finishes The Misfits, and as a celebration, Frank Sinatra throws a party. He offers to host it for the stars and the film and the directors and production people involved in The Misfits. He hires a country mansion for them all to go to. But really this party has only been set up for one thing: to talk to Marilyn and to make sure that she understood she was in a very precarious position. JFK wasn't the president yet, but it was close, any day now. And she had better not ruin it. These rumours that she was involved with communist groups needed to stop now. And she'd better stop telling doctors her every little secret. Whatever else happened during that weekend isn't really known, but 2 days after returning from the country mansion, she locked herself in a hotel room and for the third time in her life attempted an overdose. She was discovered by her publicist. She was taken to the hospital, and this time she spent 6 weeks in a psychiatric ward. By now she's completely dependent on sleeping pills. She hadn't slept without them in such a long time. As much as doctors tried to wean her off them, it just wasn't working. Well, you know, that's one of those things, right? You can read that doctors tried to wean her off of it. I don't know. I think we know better now, don't we? These Hollywood doctors, if they're paid the right price, they'll give whatever pills they're asked for. Arthur Miller at this time files for divorce on the grounds that his wife is mentally unstable, and so her third marriage comes to an end.
I do have feelings some days when there are scenes with a lot of responsibility toward the meaning, and I'll wish, gee, if only I had been a cleaning woman. On the way to the studio, I would see somebody cleaning and I'd say, that's what I'd like to be. That's my ambition in life.
It's during this period where JFK becomes President Kennedy. And it's more important than ever for her to be distanced from him. Although what's making that impossible is the press. They're coming up with all sorts of storylines, you know. She's got a special phone line that connects straight to the White House. JFK actually takes her out and about on jobs in a disguise, dressed as his secretary. The White House have a specific name for her when she calls. She has a code name. I mean, rumours, truth, who knows? Joe DiMaggio makes a small reappearance in her life. He comes to get her out of the hospital and he tries to sort of rekindle their romance, but everyone in her life is like, no way, Jose, stay away from Joe. But Joe will say, but I love her. And people will say, tough titty, said the kitty when the milk ran dry. You had your chance with her, and you blew it. So he gets kicked to the curb. They go on a few dates, but nothing really emerges. Now, just as if, right, it's just as if Marilyn Monroe's life wasn't complicated enough, she makes another decision at this point, which is going to affect everything that happens to her. She gets entangled with Bobby Kennedy, JFK's brother. And boy oh boy, it's messy. She's now involved with 2 Kennedy brothers. She's being photographed with her ex-husband Joe DiMaggio. She is becoming tabloid gold. The public, they just can't get enough. Every day she's on the cover of the newspapers. Doesn't matter what she's doing, it's documented. And then comes the opportunity to do something very special, very unique indeed. The president is having a birthday party. And who better to sing him happy birthday than the biggest female star in the world? And we all know what happened there. We've seen it. We've heard it. Did anyone try and stop her? Yes. Bobby Kennedy. He came to her dressing room hours before she was set to perform, and he begged her not to do it. He said, look, this is just going to increase the media attention. But much like the move in Korea with the troops, she knew what to do when the chips were down. When the headlines about her weren't so positive, she knew that she needed to pull a big stunt, and this was big. So, talk about shock factor. She comes out on stage. She's introduced by the host as the late Marilyn Monroe. A joke which, obviously the hundreds of people in that room find hilarious because it's a swipe at the reputation that she's always late on set. What a hoot that man is, eh? Remind me to invite him to my next dinner party. I don't throw dinner parties, by the way. I think I'd like to, but I've never done it. Anyway.
There was like a hush over the whole place when I came on to sing Happy Birthday. Like if I'd been wearing a slip, I would have thought it was showing or something. I thought, oh my gosh, what if no sound comes out? A hush like that from the people warms me. It's sort of like an embrace. Then you think, by God, I'll sing this song if it's the last thing I ever do. Because I remember when I turned to the microphone, I looked all the way up and back, and I thought that's where I'd be, way up there, under one of those rafters, close to the ceiling, after I paid my $2 to come into the place.
Now, it's so interesting because, of course, the performance of Happy Birthday does incredible things for her career. It does incredible things for her star status. It also does incredible things for those watching her. She now starts to get described in secret circles as a national threat. And almost overnight what happens is both JFK and Bobby disconnect the numbers that she has for them. She can't get hold of either brother on the phone numbers that she used to be able to get hold of them on. And it's really Bobby, actually, that she's worried about here. She's kind of fallen for him, and she's heartbroken that he's just, shut her out. Did this stop her calling the number? No, it didn't. At this time, she was in such a fragile place that friends would stay with her 24 hours a day. There were concerns that she would have another suicide attempt, or, try something else like that. And she was existing really just on alcohol and pills 24 hours a day. And she would ask every time she came out of these sleeping states, she would ask the question she loved to ask.
Did he call? Did Bobby call?
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 Did he call? Did he call?
Did Bobby
call? Did he call?
Did he call? Did he call? Did he call?
Am I
Did he
happy
call?
in life?
Did he call? Did Bobby call?
Let's see. I hope I'm
Did he
finding
call?
happiness.
Did he call? Did he call?
I have always had a pride in the fact that I was my own. Did he call? Did Bobby call?
It's quite startling when you actually look at the change in her appearance that happens in the year 1961. She starts to look really different. She starts to look just not so present in the pictures. It's kind of like she's smiling, but her eyes aren't smiling. I don't know. I find them weird. However, onwards, not being one to not put up a fight, she starts work on her next film, the never to be finished Something's Got to Give. And here's a right turn up for the books. When she's filming this, when it starts, she arrives at the set on time. She's in an okay place to film. She knows her lines, she sticks to the schedule. This is unbelievable. This is like, who is this? It's like, what's happening here? She's actually doing what we're asking her to do. By now she's seeing Dr. Greenson daily, and he sees a real improvement in her. He notes she had a determination that this film was going to be good. This one was going to get her back on top of the box office, and it was going to get her name in the papers for the right reasons. All the while she's filming, there's silence from Bobby Kennedy. Now, this is just unfortunate, but she actually gets sinusitis while she's filming, while she's in this really good period, and she phones the studio and she asks, could she have a few days off to recover? And the studio lose the plot. She's been playing ball, but this is enough, and she's fired. There's no bargaining, there's no chat, she's fired. And she takes that really badly, because this isn't I'm not coming, I'm just not going to arrive, you don't know where I am. This is genuine. She's just got a bit of sinusitis and she's asking for a couple of days off, and the reaction from the studio is massive. So just to spite her, just because they're so angry about wanting a couple of days off, the studio goes to the press and they say, we can't proceed with this film, basically because she's awful in it. She's so mentally disturbed she can barely turn up and, I quote, muster up the thing that she calls acting. She retreats into herself. She takes this really badly. She hadn't actually meant to piss the studio off this much, but she clearly had. For the next few weeks, it's really only her housekeeper, Mrs. Murray, and her Dr. Greenson who really get to see her. Then there's a change. Something strange happens. Out of the blue, she gets rehired to do the film. What? How? They'd thrown a massive strop. They'd gone to the papers about her. Well, I'll tell you how. A mystery call had been placed to Fox Studios, and a day later, she's back on the film. Who could have called? Who in the world could hold enough power to get her back on that set and get her contract renewed? Well, maybe a member of the most powerful family in America. It's during this time she gets put on another set of pills by Dr. Greenson. A strong set of pills which you can't actually get anymore. They include a drug which gets used on death row prisoners just before they're about to go to the electric chair. Lovely. Is that the kind of drug you want in your system? No, it's not, but I don't think at the time they knew quite how dangerous it was, and also she trusted Dr. Greenson. Maybe it was the pills, maybe it was her mental state, but she started to become convinced she was being watched, followed and monitored at all times. She thought that those who were employed in her home were spies. Her housekeeper, Mrs. Murray, she was convinced had been sent to spy. Her hairdresser and her stylist, they were fired because she accused them of spying. She was convinced her phone was bugged. And you know what? She was right. At this point, Marilyn had no idea that while she was out filming on that last film, the CIA had come into her home and they'd placed recording devices all over the house. In every room, her moves were being monitored. As well as this, Fox Studios had also bugged the house. They wanted to keep tabs on her too. And the FBI, just in case that wasn't enough, they'd stationed surveillance 24 hours a day outside of her house. And she had a private detective, unknowingly by her, following her every day, watching her every move. So she wasn't totally paranoid. She was right. She just didn't know that she was right. And I think fear's so interesting. Fear's something not really touched on in her story so far, but for her, I think there is a real fear here. I'm guessing because, we don't know her. But for me, I think she's gotten in over her head, and I think she knows she's in over her head. She's trapped in a way. there's nowhere for her to really go. I mean, it's not like she can just go somewhere else in the world. She's Marilyn bloody Monroe. And by now she's in a bit too deep. Now, after a long, long period of not seeing the Kennedys, she goes to a party, and they happen to be there. They pop up again at the party. Who's the host? Well, one Mr. Frank Sinatra. This wouldn't be revealed for years and years to come, but there's FBI records that show sworn testimony from guests at that party saying that Sinatra invited Marilyn to a weekend at his home to take part in an adult party. By which I mean a sex party. An orgy, if you will. Did she know that's what it was? Maybe. Maybe not, but at the party she got the chance to talk to both Kennedy brothers and ask why they had cut her off. Why had they shut her out? Reportedly they said, "You bring too much attention. Bad publicity." After that weekend, Frank Sinatra took a roll of film to his friend to develop. Well, I mean, he's going to take it to his friend, isn't he? He's Frank Sinatra. He's not going to pop down the local chemist, is he, and get his pictures developed. And when the photographer develops them, he sees something horrific. Images of Marilyn Monroe having sex with multiple men, in which she looks drugged and, as the photographer describes, terrified. He advises Frank Sinatra to burn them instantly. He says, "Burn these, they look like a rape." Frank Sinatra takes his advice. Now, I think we've proven pretty well up until this point, she is a survivor. And there's always something up her sleeve. This is one of the things I think is interesting about her. She's always got a wee something that she's like, "I've got this in my back pocket." And this thing that she's holding on to, what is it? Well, it's her diary. Yes, indeed. She has a diary which she keeps in a locked drawer, only she has the key, in her bedroom. And this diary contains lots of explosive information. There's details of the Kennedy brothers. There's details of the weekend sex parties. There's descriptions of conversations with mafia bosses. Now, this right now is where things could have been very different for Marilyn Monroe. She's always known up until this point just how to play the cards right, how to get back on top. And it's this thing with the diary, that's what she thinks is going to do it. This is going to get her out of the situation that she's in currently. She starts calling Bobby. She's got a new number for him now. And she tells him she's planning to go to the press with this diary. She'll tell it all if he doesn't start calling her back regularly. I'll be honest, I think she's overplayed her hand. I think this was a disastrous move. Telling him that she had it all written down, telling other people, she told plenty of people about this diary. That was a mistake. Remember, she's being bugged now, so plenty of people who don't want those stories out there know that there is a powerful little book in Marilyn Monroe's house. The phone call to threaten Bobby with the diary comes 3 days before the last day of her life. The following day is about to be the 4th of August 1962, and in so many ways, some will say that's just the beginning of the Marilyn Monroe story. What the hell happened in that last 24 hours? And so ends part 2.
Baby, I don't mean to make you blue, but you need a talking to. 'Cause after you get what you want, you don't want what you wanted at all. I know you. You're always wishing and wanting for something. And when you get what you want, you don't want what you get. And though I sit upon your knee, you'll grow tired of me. 'Cause after you get what you want, you don't want what you wanted at all.
If I am a star, the people made me a star. If I am a star...
Being Marilyn Monroe, what is it like?
It was the people, my fans.
I don't think people will turn against me, at least not by themselves. I like people. The public scares me, but people I trust.
Did he call? Did Bobby call?
Who the hell does she think she is? Marilyn Monroe? Marilyn Monroe? Marilyn Monroe? Marilyn Monroe?